Hello my friends, and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be my May wrap up, and I know what you're thinking, Erin, it's the end of June. Yeah, I know. I don't want to talk about it. I was procrastinating. I did not want to do this video because I know that all of you really enjoy them, but for me it's like the one video that is so daunting to film. So I ended up putting this one off, and then it kind of snowballed and became a real problem, and now I'm really late. So, you know, better late than never. So I am going to talk about the books that I read in May. If you all remember, I know it's been a while, but May was Escape the Readathon, so a lot of these books I have videos on, and I have a ton of things that I will link in the description because May was extremely busy, so I have a lot to talk about in this wrap up. Since I did talk about quite a few of these books in videos, I'm gonna have all the videos linked down below, but also that might mean that I don't talk about them as in depth as I did in the vlogs because I was able to get more of my thoughts out in those vlogs. So if you're wanting more of my opinion and it seems like I'm not going into a lot of detail, definitely check out those videos. But without further ado, I'm gonna stop procrastinating this video because we all know I am, and I'm gonna get started so we can see and talk about what I read in May. So the first two books that I'm going to talk about were both ebooks. I read them on my Kindle. I'm gonna put them first because otherwise I might forget to include them in this wrap up. So the first one is The Lost Girls by Sonia Hartle. I actually read this for Amy McCaw's book club, the YA book club. This was actually the April book club read, but I read it in May and the live show was in May. I'll have the live show linked down below, but I ended up reading this in May right before the live show, so that way I would remember it all and I wouldn't forget anything. So this is a YA vampire sapphic story, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I liked it more than I anticipated liking it. Like when I went into it, I was like, I don't really know anything about this book. I've never heard anything about this book. I didn't read the plot. I just read it so I could read it for the book club live show. So I kind of went in blind and not expecting a lot, but it was actually really cute. I know a lot of times when you're reading a vampire book, some of the like vampire rules change. You know, I feel like there are some rules that are always like really standard in vampire books, but then some things change. I really liked some of the things that this book had added to it. I thought they were really cool. I thought the way that the vampires were done were really well. I thought it was really cute, and it was really fast and quick and easy. It also has like the found family trope, which I know a lot of people love, and I thought it was really fun. I will say, looking back on it right now, like because I am filming this so much later, I really don't remember too much about this book, and I know that's going to be a problem for quite a lot of these books because I have a very bad memory when it comes to some of the books that I've read, but this one I really don't really remember that well, so I feel like it didn't stand out compared to a lot of the other books that I read. I still gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was quick and enjoyable and really entertaining, so I did like it, and I did enjoy reading it. Next up and last for the ebooks is Crows by Mark Towse. I was actually sent this by the author a while ago and I haven't had a chance to get around to it, but I did end up reading this one and it was actually a lot of fun. I also gave this 4 stars. I can't really give you a synopsis because the story is really short and I feel like anything is pretty much a spoiler, but I feel like the title kind of is a big indicator of what the story is about. It does have a lot to do with crows, which I feel like crows are very interesting, and I really like when horror books or horror stories include them or incorporate them, and this was a lot of fun. It was an easy, fast read. It wasn't, you know, too hard to digest. It was just a really easy, palatable read, and I had a lot of fun with this one. Next up is Katie by Michael McDowell. I read this for my Patreon book club for May. This was the book that we read together. I have very mixed thoughts about this story. I did enjoy it. I did end up giving it 4 stars because I enjoyed this much more than the other Michael McDowell I read, which was Cold Moon Over Babylon. I thought that one was really boring, and I do think that is just a Michael McDowell writing thing for me, because the first half of Katie I found really dense and overly descriptive, which I completely understand why Michael McDowell was trying to set the scene. This story takes place in the 1800s, you know, he was trying to lay the groundwork. I totally get it, but he spent a lot of time talking about things that I just really didn't care about, unfortunately. But I did enjoy the second half a lot. There is kind of a romance in this story, which we all know I enjoy romance in my horror, so I thought that was a lot of fun. There is a lot of animal cruelty in this book, like a lot, and I found it really descriptive and graphic, and I was not a fan. The first time it happens, it's in the prologue of the story, so it's like immediately as you begin it, and it was just not something that I enjoy in my horror. I think my biggest criticism of this book is the description or the synopsis. Personally, I find it to be extremely misleading. I think that when you read the description of this book and then you actually read the book, it feels like 2 separate stories, in my opinion. I didn't get the story that this book was talking about. But basically this book is about Philo. She and her mother are very poor and they are struggling, and they receive a letter from her grandfather explaining that he is being kind of held prisoner by this family called the Slape family, and he has a lot of money, the grandfather does. So her and her mother think that if they can help the grandfather get away from the Slape family, it might also turn their luck around. However, the Slape family are very, you know, evil people. They're not great. Katie, the daughter, she has these psychic abilities and she carries around a hammer. The Slape family and Philo end up kind of meeting, and thus begins the whirlwind of this story. My problem is that on the back of the book, like Katie especially, she's kind of explained as this girl who is like this monstrous evil girl with psychic abilities, and I guess to an extent she is, but to me personally, her psychic abilities are not really prominent or relevant in the story, like, at all, so I don't really know why it was even such a big deal to have it in the story. It just felt like a weird addition that didn't really make sense. Also, it says that Philo hunts Katie and her family throughout the streets of 1870s New York. That honestly really doesn't happen at all either. Those are just some examples of my feelings towards the description of this book. I just feel like it's very misleading, and for me personally, I was very confused when I started reading this book, but I did end up liking it, and I did overall enjoy the story that we got. I just don't think it's what I expected or what I anticipated getting into. But it is the best Michael McDowell that I've read so far, and I did overall enjoy it. Next up, I read Box of Light Volume 2. I read the first volume last October, and I really enjoyed it. It's about a convenience store that people visit when they're in between life or death, and you kind of get these short little stories of people that end up at the convenience store. You also get to learn why and how the workers are working at the convenience store. There's also like monsters involved in the stories. It's very cute, very sad. It makes me kind of like emotional, but it's also like weirdly cute and, I don't know, heartwarming at the same time. It's really weird, but I really enjoyed it, and I gave the first volume 4 stars, and I'm giving the second volume 4 stars as well. Next up, I read volumes 3, 4, 5, and 6 of Love and Heart. This is a series I started in April, I think? I don't really remember, but I continued on with the series, and this is like a horror romance. It's kind of dealing with like stalking, and I don't know, there's a lot of weird elements going on in this story. It's very strange, it's very weird. I am enjoying it. I'm kind of wondering where it's going, because we get like little glimpses of more horror elements, because right now it's not super horror, it kind of feels more like a thriller romance, but then you get these like little glimpses of horror that I'm hoping are going to come up more and more as the series goes. I have the next volume, volume 7. I haven't read it yet, but I am excited about it, and so far, because I do technically give manga series a overall rating, I don't typically change up the ratings for each volume. So far this series is getting a 4 stars from me. The last manga that I have to talk about is PTSD Radio Volume 2. I read Volume 1 in April. I am obsessed with this series. I think it is so eerie and so creepy, and I love the artwork. It kind of reminds me of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark in the sense that the artwork is so creepy, and when you look at it, it gives you such a visceral reaction. I feel the same way with the art in PTSD Radio. I gave the first volume 5 stars, and I'm continuing on with that, giving this volume 5 stars. I think it's incredible. It's like little short stories that all kind of interconnect, and it has a lot to do with hair, and I don't know, it kind of reminds me of like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, but like The Grudge as well. It's very cool. I love the art so much. It's beautiful. I don't think I felt this way about art in manga before besides Junji Ito's artwork, so I'm very pleased with this series, and I already have volume 3, so I can't wait to continue. Next up we have House of Cotton. This is by Monica Partiers. This is a anticipated release of mine, and I was really excited to get my hands on this one. I absolutely love the cover. I think the cover is beautiful. This book is very weird. It is not at all what I expected, and I still don't quite know how I feel about it. I have given it 4 stars because overall I really did enjoy it. I don't think everyone's going to enjoy this book because it is so weird that I think it's not gonna be for everyone, but I enjoyed it. So this book is about Magnolia. She's 19 and she's having a rough time. Her grandmother has recently died. She does not have a lot of money, and she gets approached by this stranger named Cotton, and he tells her that he has this job opportunity for her. It has to deal with modeling, and she readily accepts. In the beginning, the job proves to be really good. She starts getting money, and she feels like her life is starting to turn around. However, Cotton's requests become weirder and weirder, and things just kind of get weird, basically. That's the best way I can explain this book. It's very weird. Like I said, I was not expecting this book to be what it was. There are some moments of magical realism in there too. Like they're very short, but they're kind of jarring at the same time. It took me a while to like wrap my head around them and to grasp them. I'm not the best with magical realism though, so I know that's probably just like a me thing, but it was a very weird story. I don't know how else to explain it except that it's weird. It's not what you're gonna expect from it. It went in a completely different direction than what I anticipated. I did overall enjoy it though. I just think it's gonna have its audience and it's not gonna be for everyone. But I did go and give this one 4 stars. Next up we have Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. I actually read this for a Secret Santa type of thing that we did for the Escape the Readathon hosts. I'll link that vlog down in the description as well. I didn't love this one. I think I'm gonna give it 3 stars. Unfortunately, this was just not what I wanted it to be. This book is about Erin. She is the main character, and I was really excited because I love when the main character's name is Erin. It makes me really excited, so I was happy about that. But Erin has this boyfriend who is an on and off again boyfriend. He's an addict, and the addiction is primarily the reason why him and Erin are so on and off again, and he ends up dying from an overdose. And this sends Erin into kind of a tailspin because they did not end on the best of terms. But then her friend lets her know about this drug called Ghost, and it lets you trip and basically see and speak to the dead. What I did like about this book is that it's a really good depiction of addiction and kind of shows what really goes on when someone is addicted, and I did like that aspect. I think my problem is that's pretty much all this book was to me. I was expecting more of a ghost story. That is in the book. I do feel like this book is primarily just about addiction, and for me, it didn't really work all the way. I just was expecting something more unique, and the story is incredibly unique. I'm not saying it's not. It's incredibly unique in the way it's telling its story. I just think the story itself isn't that unique. The way that the story is told is really different, and I do like the approach to that. I just think the overall story isn't that surprising, and I was just expecting a little bit more from it. So unfortunately, I am going to give this one the middle of the road 3-star rating. The next 4 books are the books that I read for my Japanese and Korean horror / thriller reading vlog. The first one I read was Earthlings by Sayaka Murata, and I also gave this one 4 stars. Wow, there's a lot of 4 stars in this wrap up. This book has been recommended to me a lot, especially when I talk about disturbing horror books. This one gets recommended to me a ton, and I can definitely see why. This is a very hard book to explain, so I'm not going to tell you too much about that. So this book is about the main character, Natsuki, and she has this stuffed hedgehog that is her friend that she talks to, and he has told her that he is from a different planet and he has come to help her save Earth. And that's a very, very, very vague description of this book, because there are so many things I could say about this book, but honestly I can't because it is very spoilery. This book is a wild ride. I can definitely understand why people consider it disturbing. The first half is extremely disturbing to me, mostly because the first half really focuses on realistic horror, which I think we all know is some of my favorite horror. I find that to be the most disturbing and to be the most horrific. But all of that is really done to explain why everything happens in the second half of this book. And I think, to me, the reason this book is so sad, which it's extremely sad. This book is really sad. This book is sad and disturbing, but it all makes sense, at least for me. It is weird, don't get me wrong, very weird, especially the second half, really, really weird. But I do feel like it makes sense why this is so weird of a story. I think when you really look at what the story is, I think it makes complete sense, and I really enjoyed it. I think the second half goes a little bit off the wall, a little bit too weird sometimes for me, but I did overall enjoy this book, and I am going to give it 4 stars. Next up we have The Good Son by Jung Yoo Jung, and this is a Korean thriller. This is about the main character who is 25, and he has suffered from seizures and memory problems pretty much all his life. And one morning he wakes up to the smell of blood, and he finds his mother's dead body at the bottom of the stairs. Thus begins his journey to try and figure out what actually happened. Now, this is a very interesting thriller because it's done in a way that I really didn't expect, and it really is wild. It's a little bit predictable, especially once you kind of figure out what exactly is happening. It does become more predictable, but the first half of this story was really confusing, but in a way that was able to keep me guessing and to keep me on my toes, and I really liked that. The one big thing that I really didn't like about this book is that there are no chapters, so it's just like really long parts. It's split up into parts, and those parts are just like continuous. There's no like real breaks between them, and for me personally that is very irritating to read. I like chapters. I like to have like little breaks, especially being someone that can't stop reading in the middle of a chapter, so I was really trying to like force myself to read from part to part, and some of those parts were like really long, so that was a little frustrating. But I did find this to be a really good time. It was very entertaining, and I did overall enjoy it. I think because of the way it does turn out in the end, it's a little bit predictable, like I said, so I will probably give this one a 4-star as well. The next one is Now Youre One of Us by Asa Nonami, and I was really worried about this book because I've seen mixed things, but I've had this book on my TBR for a really long time, and it has been compared to Rosemary's Baby, which was one of my favorite books of last year, so I was really excited to get to this one. This is about the main character, Noriko. She has just recently married into this family, and her in-laws are kind of like picture perfect. Like, whatever you hope and dream and wish your in-laws to be like, that's what they are for her, and they're just so warm and accommodating, and they just want the best, and they're just so kind. However, there are some weird things about her in-laws, and there's some weird circumstances that happen that kind of make her start questioning her in-laws a bit, and she kind of has to decide if she wants to see what's really going on beneath the surface. I really liked the way this was written because it is very quick and easy to read. I feel like I sped through this book. It was just like so quick. It is a lot of build up though. Like, nothing really happens for like 90% of the book in my opinion, but the very end did make up for it for me personally, because the ending was just so wild that I was kind of like, alright, it's not a big deal that you just let me go through all of this for, you know, nothing, because the ending just made up for it. The other thing that I didn't love about it is the main character, Noriko. She did get on my nerves a little bit. She kind of flip-flopped a lot during the book, which is understandable to an extent because she was going through like some crazy stuff, but it was mostly her being like, I should find out what's going on with them. No, I'm just gonna leave them alone. I should find out what's happening with them. I'm gonna leave it alone. I should find out what's really happening. I'm gonna leave it alone. I just was like, please pick a side. Either find out what's going on or just remain in the dark. I don't care, but just pick a side. That's all I really wanted from her, was to pick a side. So it took a long time for me to like get over that, but like I said, the ending kind of did make up for it, so I didn't really know what I was going to give this book at first. I was leaning towards a 3.5, but I like the ending enough, so I am bumping it up to a 4-star. And then I read Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. Unfortunately, this one didn't work for me. This is a short story collection. I believe it's like science fiction, magical realism, horror. I didn't love the stories in this one. There's 10 stories in this collection, and I liked about 5 of them, so it was very mixed, unfortunately. I know a lot of people love this one. I think it was just the combination of like science fiction and magical realism and stuff. Those aren't really my areas, so I think it was just like a combination of that, and I just couldn't really get into it, so I am unfortunately giving this one a 3-star. And then I ended up reading 2 T. Kingfisher books. The first one is The Hollow Places, and I was actually very nervous to read this one because I've heard a lot about it, and I was like, this is not going to be for me. Basically, this is about the main character, Kara. She has just been recently divorced, and she ends up moving in with her uncle. And looking around, she uncovers this bunker, and this bunker is very strange. I wasn't sure I was gonna like this. Like I said, I really didn't think it was gonna be for me, but I have recently just discovered that I love T. Kingfisher's writing. She kind of reminds me of Darcy Coates in the sense that you kind of always know what you're gonna get with her books, and her writing's very easy. It's not too overly complicated. Her characters are always really like fun, and I just really like her characters. I find them really relatable, which is also how I feel about Darcy's characters. So I just really love T. Kingfisher's writing. And this one surprised me because it's not what I expected it to be, and the parts that I was really worried about didn't end up being as in my face as I thought they were gonna be. It does happen, like the things that I was nervous about, they did occur, but they weren't as overpowering in the story as I just expected them to be. I actually did end up enjoying this book, and I have a feeling that I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much had it been written by someone else. I think T. Kingfisher's writing just made it more enjoyable and more easily digestible for me, because it includes things that I'm not the biggest fan of in horror, but for some reason it worked out and I really enjoyed it. And because I really enjoyed it, I'm going to give it 4 stars. The second T. Kingfisher book I read was A House with Good Bones, and this one also really surprised me. I didn't have high hopes. I actually didn't know anything about this book when I bought it. I just saw a lot of people talking about it. I knew I wanted to read more T. Kingfisher, so I bit the bullet and I went ahead and I bought it, and I do not regret it at all. The story is about Sam, and she ends up going to stay with her mom for a little bit because her job has been kind of put on hold. The home she's going back to was also her grandmother's home, and they inherited it. So she goes back home and she realizes that all the changes that her mother made to the house have been reverted back. So it kind of looks like how it did when her grandmother lived in the house. And Sam's mom just seems a little bit off. Her mother is just acting very jumpy in certain conversations. She reacts very oddly. Sam is just noticing something doesn't seem quite right with her mom. This story surprised me. I had no idea what it was about, and I was pleasantly surprised. Like I said, the second half of this book is very bizarre, and typically I think I wouldn't be into the kind of story it ends up being. However, like I said with The Hollow Places, I think had it been written by someone else other than T. Kingfisher, I wouldn't like it as much. But there's just something about T. Kingfisher's writing in horror that I really enjoy. It's cozy and easy to read, and her characters are so lovable, and she's got a formula to her stories, but they still stay fun and entertaining, and again, just really reminds me of Darcy Coates, which is why I think I enjoy her books so much, just like I enjoy Darcy's. So this one threw me for a loop, didn't expect it, didn't expect to like it. There's a lot of bugs in this book. The main character's a little weird. She's got little quirks to her, but I really enjoyed her. There's almost kind of a little bit of a romance hinted at the story too. It's not very overpowering, but it's just kind of like a could be maybe romance, which I also really enjoyed. And I don't know, this was just like a really shocking story for me. I didn't expect to enjoy it, and I am going to give it 4.5 stars because I think so far this is my absolute favorite T. Kingfisher that I've read. The next 4 books are included in the vlog that I did that was a collaboration with Sav, or Riveting Reads, here on YouTube. The first book that we read was The Butcher by Jennifer Hillier. I love Jennifer Hillier. She's one of my favorite thriller authors of all time, so I have very much been excited to read this one. The story is a serial killer story, and you actually get the perspective of the serial killer included with 2 other characters, which I thought was really interesting. I did enjoy this one. It's not my favorite Jennifer Hillier story that I've read. Personally, I found the writing to be a little bit less developed than some of the other books that I've read from her, like Jar of Hearts and Little Secrets. I definitely prefer her writing in those ones, and I just preferred the stories overall. This was really fun and really easy, and I feel like I flew through it. It was really quick and fast-paced. I just feel like when I'm reading a serial killer thriller, I have high expectations. And especially when we're given a perspective of the serial killer, I'm always going to compare the story to The Nothing Man by Catherine Ryan Howard, which is one of my favorite thrillers of all time. I find it to be the one that I hold all other serial killer perspective books too, and nothing will ever top The Nothing Man, because I think it has a very raw and emotional aspect to it that I think no other book has really been able to capture as well for me personally. So while this one was fun and enjoyable, it just wasn't anything super stand out to me. I am going to give it 4 stars because I did like it and I love anything by Jennifer Hillier, but it's not the best serial killer thriller that I've read. Then we have Nothing More to Tell by Karen M. McManus. This was the first book I've ever read from this author, and I actually really enjoyed this one. This story is about Bryn, and she ended up leaving her school because her favorite teacher was murdered, and there was just like a lot going on around that time. And now she is back, and she's actually landed a dream internship with this true crime podcast that she loves, and she's kind of using this internship as a way of looking into the murder of this teacher to uncover what really happened. So there is nothing super special about this story. I don't find it to be anything unique or mind-blowing or wildly different or, you know, one of a kind. I don't think it's anything like that, but it was really enjoyable. It was entertaining. There's some romance in it. It's a little bit silly. It's a little bit cheesy like a YA is, but I personally had a lot of fun while reading this one, and I can definitely see myself picking up more by Karen M. McManus. I think the only thing that I didn't love was the reveal in the end. It felt a little anticlimactic to me because I think it was just a little too predictable, and I wanted a little bit more. I was hoping for a little bit more of a crazy, wild twist, and I didn't quite get that. But otherwise, I did have a lot of fun with this one, and I'm going to give it 4 stars. Next up, we have The Cotton Candy Massacre by Christopher Robertson. Oh goodness, this book. I don't really want to talk about this one for too long because I really didn't enjoy this book. I know it's a fan favorite, but personally, I did not like this one. This is an 80s slasher. It has to do with like clowns, has to do with the carnival. I think that this could have been a really good story. It has those B-movie elements that I think are really kind of iconic for some slashers, and I do think there are some good things about this story. Some of the gore was really well done. I think the story itself is very unique. There are some really interesting elements added to like the carnival and the kind of clown aspect that I thought was really interesting and really unique, and I really enjoyed that. I think my problem here is with the writing. One, this is considered a splatterpunk, which I was actually shocked by because to me this wasn't that overly bloody or graphic or gory. I think I just have really, you know, high tolerance levels in that aspect. So I think for me personally, I could have done with more. I think it was just a little lacking in that area. My other problem is with the characters. Mainly one character in particular, the girl named Candy. I just did not like the way she was written. The way she is described is like she's supposed to be very small and tiny. It's brought up in like every single conversation that's about her and how like small and tiny she is, and she has these like mannerisms that are just very little girl-like, and she's a teenager. She's like 17 years old, and for me it was just very bizarre that she was written so childlike, and I just felt like it was a very weird direction to go in. I personally just didn't enjoy hearing a 17-year-old act like a 5-year-old. It was just very bizarre. This is also just like excessively long for me, in my opinion. I just don't think slashers should be that long. I think slashers should be really quick and fast-paced and just easy to fly through, and I found this book really slow and boring a lot of the time, and I just kind of wanted it to be over. So unfortunately, I think I'm gonna go and give this 2.5 stars. I just wasn't that big of a fan, and it just didn't really work for me. And then we have This Delicious Death by Kayla Cottingham. This was one of my most anticipated releases for the year, and I was very excited to read this one because I absolutely loved My Dearest Darkest. This book is about this thing called the hollowing, and what happened is people went kind of feral and started eating human flesh. And to prevent people from just attacking other people, scientists ended up creating this synthetic flesh. That way they could get what they needed from the flesh, but they didn't need to kill and attack random people or their loved ones. So the story follows these 4 friends who are all part of the Hollow, so they all need synthetic flesh to survive, and they're going to this kind of concert in the desert, very similar to Coachella, and they're very excited, but when they get there, one of the girls ends up going feral and attacking some guy in a band. And then the girls basically need to find out what's going on and what's happening, because this situation should not have occurred. I was very interested in this book because it's a YA cannibal horror story, and I was very unsure how a YA book was going to handle cannibalism, but I will say I was very surprised. This is a very different take on cannibals. It feels almost kind of like a zombie apocalypse, but with cannibals, which I didn't think I would like when I started reading it, but I actually found it to be very interesting, and I don't know, it's a very unique kind of story, and I actually really enjoyed it. I do feel like it was a little bit predictable, especially towards the end. I wasn't super surprised by the twists that occurred, but I did end up liking it a lot. It is sapphic, just like My Dearest Darkest, which I also enjoyed. I do think My Dearest Darkest is still my favorite, so I will probably end up giving this one maybe 4.5 stars, but I did really like it and I thought it was a lot of fun. And then the last 3 books in this wrap-up are 3 YA horror books I wanted to finally read. First is She Is a Haunting by Trang Tan Tran. This was one of my most anticipated releases for this year. Unfortunately, I didn't love this one. So this book is about the main character, Jade. She is visiting her estranged father in Vietnam, and he is kind of renovating this house to become a bed and breakfast, and she's with her little sister and her dad, and things are just very uncomfortable. She's there because she made her father a deal and she kind of needs to keep her end of the bargain. So she's there to spend 5 weeks of her summer with him, and things start getting a little weird and spooky when she arrives at this house that is becoming a bed and breakfast. I had really high hopes for this book. I think the idea of it is really cool. I mean, there are so many good things about this story that I wanted to love. However, my main criticism is that this story is so confusing. I was confused the entire time. I really didn't know what was going on 90% of the time. And I can't tell if it's just the way it's written or if it was something else, but I was so confused. Like, I still don't really know what happened in this story. Even by the end, I just felt like everything was super unclear and I had no idea what this story was actually really, about. I just couldn't make out what the story was supposed to be or where it was going or what was really happening. I don't know. I felt like the writing was so confusing and I'm still so unsure what happened in this book, and it's really unfortunate because I think this book had so much going for it, but because of me being confused 90% of the story, I have to give it 3 stars. Next up is And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagich. This was a very interesting story. I really had no expectations going in because I've seen very mixed reviews about this one and I was not sure what I was going to get. So this story is about the 2 main characters, Scylla and Nori. They are sisters and they end up kind of running away to their aunt's house, and once they get there they realize that their aunt's manor is not quite right. Something is very weird, and the woods behind the house are also very strange and eerie, and it feels like the trees are coming closer and closer to the house after they've been there for a little bit. So I really enjoyed how this story is told. It almost reminds me of House of Leaves, but much better in my opinion because I didn't enjoy House of Leaves. But like, the writing is very interesting. It kind of curves and you have to read it a little bit differently. I really liked that. They have little pieces of paper in the book. They also have little journal entries with words that are in bold, and when you put all the words in bold together, it kind of makes like a secret message. I don't know, I just really liked how interactive the reading experience was. Again, reminded me of House of Leaves, but personally I preferred this much more because I felt like the story was more interesting in this one and more creepy and eerie. I do feel like this book would be perfect for October because it just has that creepy, eerie feeling while you're reading it, and I really enjoyed that. I will say the ending I wasn't the biggest fan of. I didn't hate the ending. I feel like it was a little predictable, but also I just didn't want it to be that. Like, once I figured out where it was going, I was like, no, I don't want that, please, no. But that's how it ended, and I was a little sad about it because it is kind of a sad ending. Very weird story, very weird book. You're confused about 90% of the time, but I did enjoy that because I do kind of like being confused. I feel like it adds to the reading experience and kind of keeps you on your toes, so I did enjoy that. The ending was a little bit of a letdown for me, but overall I enjoyed it, so I'm also giving this one 4 stars. And the last book in this wrap-up is Don't Tell a Soul by Kirsten Miller. So this is a YA book that I'd had on my shelves for such a long time, and I was contemplating unhauling it, but I decided to give it a read, and I'm actually really glad that I did. So this book is about Bram, and she's kind of running from something. Something happened, and she is trying to escape it. So she ends up going to live with her uncle James, and her uncle James is kind of dealing with his own stuff. His wife actually just recently passed away because of a fire that happened in his house, and the fire was supposedly set by his wife's daughter, so his stepdaughter, and the town is like very secretive. They don't really like outsiders, and Bram is just very interested in her uncle's house because her uncle's house has kind of a ghost story surrounding it. So there's a lot of things happening in this one, and Bram just kind of decides that she wants to investigate what's really going on. This also has a really good atmosphere, like And the Trees Crept In. I really liked the way this story is told. I feel like it has a very good, eerie, creepy vibe about it, and I just really liked the atmosphere when I was reading this one. I will say that this isn't super unique. I feel like this one just was a little bit like, okay, that's where we're going, sure. While this book isn't the most unique or interesting or wild or different or special, I did really have a good time while reading it. It was fun, it was entertaining, it kept me interested. I liked where the story went, I liked the characters, and even if the twist wasn't like my absolute favorite, I did enjoy it and I liked how it ended. So for those reasons, I'm also going to give this book 4 stars. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for a very, 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 very late May wrap up. Like I said, I know it's late. I know I'm really behind. My June wrap up won't be far behind this one, so you'll have 2 wrap ups pretty much back to back, unfortunately, but that's just kind of what happened for me. I just kind of let it get the best of me and I got really behind. So I hope you still enjoyed my extremely late wrap up and you don't mind that it's, you know, a month late. If you've read any of these books and you feel similarly or you disagree, let me know in the comments down below. I would love to know what you think of them. You can go ahead and let me know what you read in May, what your favorite, least favorite book was, if you want to, if you even remember what happened in May. I know it was very, very long ago, so you probably have no recollection like I did because some of these books I barely remember reading. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoy my wrap-ups, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. That way I know that you enjoy them and I can keep doing them even if they are a month late. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to my channel. We can become friends, talk about books, horrifying books, thrilling books, romance books, manga, all that good fun stuff. I also have a Patreon that you can join. It'll be linked in the description. And with that being said, I hope you're having a great day, night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!